I don't think there's something quite as scary to a British guy as being forced to watch the canned laughter and smell the stale that exists in a late night talk show's studio. Yet, that is the setting of the very good new Shudder original film Late Night with the Devil. So the plot of Late Night with the Devil is quite original, but an effective twist on the possession devil subgenre of horror. It follows Jack Delroy, who is a late night TV show host, and his career in which it's kind of going out. It's not in the toilet, it's not in the bin, but it's going down, and it's not where he wants to be. It's not that coveted number one spot that he wants on the TV ratings chart. So what he does is he decides that this Halloween episode, which comes after a long break for his away from TV because of a tragic personal reason, is the one that's going to put him back on the map and send the ratings skyrocketing, because he's got some creepy kind of people involved as special guests for the show. And that's the premise of the show. And sorry, I call it a show, and it's actually a film, which just goes to show how effective it is. Because it is effective, and the story, what it does is, you see the film, and the film presents itself as a kind of a documentary, or the never before seen footage of what happened on that night, on that episode, that Halloween special of Night Owls, which is what the TV show is called. And I think this is a really great way of kind of experiencing a horror film, and it was original. And so what you kind of are watching it as a would-be audience member, so you're seeing all the shots through the smooth gimbal and camera operator moves that's on the set, right? And it's kind of a chamber drama, because it's only really in one location that the film takes place, but it doesn't feel stilted, because the film does a really good job of building tension, and that's credit not just to David Dalmakian, probably butchered his name, but he's in everything. You've seen him in everything. He was literally in Dune recently, right? He was fantastic, and I think his name elevated probably the project in terms of producers' eyes, or maybe production companies' eyes, and maybe to why it gave it the cinema kind of release that it got, because I don't really know any of the actors. However, the other actors were splendid as well, and they all did their roles fantastically, and they were committed, and they all had different characters. And I think what the film did really well, the directors did really well, the Cairns brothers, and I can't say it without sounding a bit Aussie, because they are Aussie. They did a really good job of bringing this drama to life, the personal drama. So it starts out with this prologue that is like a voiceover exposition documentary, like skit, of it basically giving the main chapters of Jack Delroy, who's the presenter, played by Dalmakian, giving the chapters of his career, and how that this Halloween special is the one that could make or break him, and that it all went awry, and now we're the lucky people to actually see what happened that night, right? Now, on the face of it, that sounds like a shit way to start a film, right? Basically exposition, right? And maybe some like still frames and things. But you know what? I think it worked. Had it been any longer, I might have been. But I knew what I was getting myself into, and you kind of need that to enjoy the originality of the rest of the film and how it's presented and the events that happen in the film. Once that's done, you then do see everything through these camera studio eyes, right? But in between that, when the ad break's happening, you don't just get a hard cut, right, and it goes to commercial. Instead, you actually get this kind of documentary cinema verite, black and white, different aspect ratio, handheld perspective that follows Jack Delroy around talking with his producers, the other people on set, the lighting guy, whatever, right? And it gives this grounded feel to the film. Now, granted, filmically, and the filmic logic of it doesn't really work, because it's being filmed from like multiple angles, and they're still all mic'd up, so from a production standpoint, it doesn't really work, right? You have to suspend disbelief that this is a documentary, right? For example, with like Blair Witch Project, you could easily believe that it was camcorder footage held by people at the people there, because it was exactly that. But even for a TV studio setting with a big budget like this, that is, riffing off John Oliver or the other American TV show host that you have over in, you know, across the Atlantic. Still, this is not how it would look like, right? And it is hard to believe. You do have to suspend disbelief to believe that that they filmed it all like this, right? But barring that aside, barring its presentation, which is really original, the story is kind of standard, but the way it's presented through these elements is interesting. And so what you have is Jack Delroy presents a host of guests that have connections to the supernatural. So once the show actually starts, you get the guests, which all have a connection to the occult and the supernatural. And the first guest that they have on is a bloke called Christou, who's like a spirit medium and he can talk to the dead. So he does that thing where he feels the presence in the room and then he speaks to the audience there and tells this mother and this daughter that their brother's son is there in the room with him and basically uses tricks to make them believe that he can speak to them, right? That he's crossed to the other side. And there's another guest on at the same time there who's played by Ian Bliss, who's called Carmichael Haig. Now he is a magician, but he's set up this research group that are asking to give out $500,000 to someone that can, you know, present the supernatural to him and his research group that's actually true with evidence. And basically he calls out this guy and all the subsequent guests and says, yeah, you're all bullshitters, this is a load of rubbish, and you're all charlatans, like me, but you're not honest, right? And that's where the tension comes on. And it's all going swell and fine and dandy, and you're a bit of an audience member, and you kind of listen to Carmichael Haig, but then something changes, and Christou suddenly becomes ill, doesn't feel well, starts doing weird things, and it goes on from there. And it's really the interaction between these characters and how Jack Delroy, as the MC, the host, responds to them, how the things that are happening are kind of touching on the personal aspects of his life, which you get to know through the prologue, and how that then bleeds into whether this occult stuff is really happening or not. And it's great. It does a great job of building the tension. And bear in mind that the budget of this film is quite small. It's a chamber drama. There's no other settings, but you know there's props, and it feels like a very much a 70s kind of TV show. Now I did read one review that I kind of agree with this kind of slightly negative point, other than the fact that you have to suspend disbelief to kind of buy into the presentation of the film, which, do you know what, because of its originality, I was happy to suspend my disbelief. Was it perfect from a logic perspective? No, but whatever. If that takes away from your experience, that's fine. But I think that's more of kind of a logical thing, because the affective aspects of the film of making you feel tense and kind of horrified at what's happening or what's about to happen is quite effective. But I will agree with another reviewer that said that they couldn't believe, or found it hard to believe, that Jack Delroy even made it to where they were in the story because they weren't that charismatic. And I would agree with that slightly, but again, I don't find Jimmy Kimmel or Jimmy Fallon, especially Jimmy Fallon, that charismatic anyway. Like, I don't know why people keep sitting in the audience and going to see him, especially Fallon. I don't find them funny. I'd rather watch Jack Delroy than either of the Jimmys, and they get to present the bloody Oscars. Do you know what I mean? So I don't really agree with that point fully. And also, to counter that point once again, is that Jack Delroy's ratings aren't as high as these Fallons or the Kimmels or the John Olivers or whatever, or the Colberts, you know. So, you know, that kind of is written away in the story as well, so that's a minor thing. It's a smaller production, and you can kind of tell with some of the special effects and everything that it is a smaller production. But what it does to kind of make those effects work is it feeds it through this kind of 70s veneer, and because it's kind of doing that time and doing that look, of course the special effects are going to be a little more rudimentary and hands-on, right? And the digital effects won't work as well. So I think that was a good excuse as well, or a smart choice as well, or it was kind of saved by the setting in that sense. So that I didn't mind that worked. And when shit did hit the fan, I did think it looked good, because they didn't use a lot of practical stuff, right? And I won't go into spoilers of what actually happens, but when shit does hit the fan, and it's quite close to the end of the film kind of, it doesn't run out of steam, but it goes, and it goes for probably 10-15 minutes, and then it's done. And I think horror films suffer from this a lot, other than say like the classics like Alien, for example, or Predator, is that once you know the creature, once you know the monster, once you know what's going on, the fear's gone because you can see in the dark at that point, right? And I felt that once you kind of knew what was, or when you saw the evil thing that was happening, it happened and it did what it did and it was, destructive and everything. But then the film kind of ends quite soon after that, and I kind of just wish that we actually had a little bit longer, because what they did, once again they kind of broke the fourth wall. Instead of it being this, you were seeing the behind the scenes footage, it then kind of went into the mind of Jack Delroy, what he was experiencing, which obviously is a break in perspective, so filmically it doesn't work, because Jack Delroy, it wasn't like he was holding a blooming selfie camera going, oh, I'm hallucinating, because you see his hallucinations, right? Minor spoiler. But if you can suspend your disbelief, you will get a lot out of this film, I think. Yes, the ending, some people like, some people don't like, some people find ambiguous, because it is steeped in kind of American folklore or American political conspiratorial modern history, and I won't give away on that. But if you do your research and you ask a few questions on Google or Weibo or whatever you use, then you will get an answer, and it's quite interesting, right? The visual iconography and what these creatures are that are presented, because it does have a basis in reality, right? And there's the meta-narrative potentially there of that, what do you sacrifice for fame? But fundamentally, what made this film really zing was its originality in its setting, its commitment as a consequence of that setting to the presentation, and the chamber drama being kind of made to work because of the actors and their capabilities, even though you probably don't know any of them except one, and that's Dalmakian, and even then I had to look up his name. I just knew him as that guy who's in everything, and he's always fantastic. So, look, there was also a little tidbit that I want to get into, is that there's the controversy of AI. Now, AI was used in like 3 still frames, which are used in between to like, just as it's going to go into commercial, and then it cuts to this different black and white perspective as, camera operators following around Jack Delroy. And look, I saw someone on Twitter, or X as they now call it, saying something like, when I saw this owl for the Night Owls logo on Late Night with the Devil, it totally took me out of it because it was AI, and I just knew it was AI. And actually, I think watching that film, I looked and I was like, oh, it does look a bit AI-y. But that was about it, really. And look, I know AI kind of is a scary thing, especially for creators that make things, when a robot can do it and steal yours and a million other people like you's work and bring it all together to bring something that looks amazing but is soulless and dead inside, and it has 6 fingers and like a 3rd eye in its ear and whatnot. But to write off the whole of this film, as good as it is, because it used AI in 3 still frames, I think is pretty, self-flagellating, self-destructive. If you want to ruin it for yourself that much, and the people have talked about boycotting the film, then I think what people do is they're cutting the nose off to spite the face, because whilst it, using AI and how morally deplorable that might be, and a face to creativity itself, do you know what isn't? The rest of the film, because it is original and it's committed to its vision, and it does a lot with the little that it has. And I want to see more productions like this from creators that haven't made things in the past to wider audiences, but brings new kind of, or not completely new original ideas, but takes a chance on twisting something and making it something a bit new with a bit of spice, bit of difference, bit of zest. And if you're, in a spooky feeling, and it's coming up to October maybe, and you're feeling like getting a bit creepy, but you don't want to just see, your schlock. You want something that's a bit creepier, that's a bit more sinister, that isn't your kind of usual horror, then there's nothing better than maybe staying up late at night with the devil.